Dear students, this video is about various presumptions which are drawn during the interpretation of statutes. There are different kinds of presumptions which are routinely and very frequently drawn while doing the interpretative exercise. One of the foremost presumptions about one of the foremost presumption about the interpretation of statute during interpretation of statute about statutes is that every statute is presumed to be valid, valid from the point of view of its constitutionality. So every statute is presumed to be constitutionally valid when it is enacted by the legislature or by the parliament. And we know that the validity of a statute can be questioned on two grounds. One is that the statute is in violation of fundamental rights, part 3rd of the Indian Constitution, and second can be uh, on the ground of lack of legislative competence, in the sense that under 7th schedule of the Constitution, the legislature which has enacted the statute does not have the competence to enact. So those are the two grounds for attacking the constitutional validity of a statute. However, before those grounds can be launched and they can be taken into account by the court, uh, the presumption of validity has to be rebutted. So this is a very strong, very important presumption in favor of the validity, in favor of the constitutional validity of the statute. And as a concomitant, as an additional consequence of the presumption of constitutionality, there are certain other presumptions also which are taking into account, which are presumption about the existence of certain facts and certain circumstances which are also brought into picture. And as the extension and as an instance of a specific application of the presumption of constitutionality or constitutional validity of a statute is the rule of severability, and also the rule of reading down a statute, the rule of reading into a statute. So those are also in a way extensions of the presumption of validity of all statutes. Now this presumption as to the validity of a statute has been extensively discussed, debated by the courts. One of the most authoritative pronouncement on the subject matter about the constitutional validity of a statute was laid down in Ramkrishna Dalmia versus Justice S.R. Tendulkar. That was way back in 1958. And in Ramkrishna Dalmia judgment, Supreme Court went on to lay down the ground and different parameters on the basis of which this presumption of constitutional validity about statutes would operate. Supreme Court held, and it gave us 5.6 point criteria, factors, and different permutations and combinations which have to exist for the presumption in favor of the validity of the statutes to be sustained. First and foremost, Supreme Court held that there is always a presumption in favor of the constitutionality of an enactment, and if there is a presumption about the constitutionality of an enactment, then the burden of proof is upon the person who tries to show otherwise, who is trying to establish that the statute is not valid or it is unconstitutional. So the burden of proof will flow from the presumption of validity in favor of the statute, and it will lie on the person who is trying to challenge the validity of the statute. Then the court said that in order to appreciate, in order to work this presumption of validity, it has to be also presumed, it must be presumed that the legislature understands and correctly appreciates the needs of its own people, that its laws are directed to problems made manifest by experience, and that its discriminations are based on adequate grounds. Because the legislature comprises of the representative of the people at both the levels, at the central as well as at the state level, they are presumed to know the needs of their people, and therefore the presumption of validity is premised on this presumption that the legislature knows best the needs of its own people. And because that knowledge of the legislature comes from the experience which the representative of the people have with the people while sitting in the legislature. So that is another point which was laid down. Next was that the legislature is also free to recognize degrees of harm and may confine its restriction to those cases where the need is deemed to be the clearest. So again, that is a presumption in favor of the legislature, because it provides, because if the legislature has provided certain restrictions or has created some exceptions, then again the presumption is in favor of the legislature, that that it knows the need of restrictions and exceptions that the law should apply to a particular set of circumstances or particular class of people or not. Similarly, the next in point was in Ramkrishna Dalmia case, Supreme Court held that in order to sustain the presumption of constitutionality, the court may take into consideration matters of common knowledge, matters of common report, the history of the times, and may assume every state of facts which can be conceived existing at the time of legislation, which means that it is the presumption of validity which draws the court to presume many more facts, many existence of many more circumstances, and lead an inquiry into the history and the background and the mischief, etc., etc. So you can see that the presumption working in combination with mischief rule of interpretation as well, and also giving birth to large number of other presumptions. However, the court at the end laid down that while good faith and knowledge of the existing conditions on the part of the legislature are to be presumed, if there is nothing on the face of the law or the surrounding circumstances brought to the notice of the court on the basis of which classification may be regarded reasonable, the presumption of constitutionality cannot be carried to the extent of saying that to the extent of holding that there must be some undisclosed and unknown reason for subjecting certain individuals or groups to hostile or discriminatory legislation, which means the presumption is there, presumption about the validity, presumption about the knowledge of the facts and circumstances, presumption about the need of the people in favor of the legislature is there. But if on the reading of the statute there is nothing to disclose, or reasons are not to be found that that there is any reasonable basis on there is any reasonable ground on the basis of which people have been subjected to differential treatment or distinct provisions, different laws, then you can't sustain the presumption of validity. Therefore, presumption of validity in favor of the statute is a rebuttable presumption, and there has to be a reasonable collection to establish that the presumption is a reasonable presumption. And as an extension of this is of course is a very important, very significant presumption while undertaking any interpretative exercise about the statutes. So every time the question of interpretation of a statute comes, this preliminary question, this preliminary presumption about the validity of the statute, particularly when the validity of the statute is in question, has to be rebutted. And because of the extraordinary importance of this presumption, the question was raised soon after Ramkrishna Dalmia case, whether this presumption will apply to pre-constitutional laws also. As far as post-constitutional laws is concerned, it is clear that presumption will apply. Justice Ramkrishna Dalmia case very clearly held it. But what about situation, what is the position with respect to pre-constitutional laws? Whether pre-constitutional laws can also be presumed to be similarly valid? Because pre-constitutional laws have not been enacted under the Indian Constitution or the distribution of legislative power under the Indian Constitution, or with the restrictions on the legislative power imposed by the Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. However, And many of those laws were established by the Britishers, by the British parliaments or the legislatures under the control of the British. However, in series of cases, including Ramkrish Dalmia case, Keshwa Madhav Menon versus the state of Bombay, Anuj Garg versus Hotel Association of India, Supreme Court held that there is nothing to suggest that this principle about the validity, presumed validity of statutes would not apply to pre-constitutional laws. Why? Because you see, pre-constitutional laws have been validated by the constitution itself under Article 372. Now, and the power to amend, power to change, power to repeal, and reenact those legislations have been given to an appropriate legislature, to a competent legislature. Now, when the legislature, the competent legislature chooses not to amend or modify or to repeal that law, the this choice of the legislature of not interfering with the pre-constitutional law goes in favor of the pre-constitutional law. Implicitly, we can conclude, we can infer that the legislature or the parliament does not want the pre-constitutional law to become invalid. Therefore, as far as the presumption is concerned, the presumption about the validity, it can be very reasonably inferred in and drawn in case of pre-constitutional laws as well. So that's a very important. Those are very important aspects about the presumption of constitutionality in favor of all laws, whether it is pre-constitutional law or a post-constitutional law. And somewhere else, I have developed this reasoning that if you extend this reasoning to the doctrine of basic structure, I have argued on number of occasions that the non-exercise of the power of the parliament to amend the constitution goes on to draw a conclusion, or goes on to develop an allegiance of the people through parliament about the existing provisions of the constitution. So succeeding generations who may not have had any say at the time of the making of the constitution, they renew their faith, their allegiance to the constitution through parliament, particularly when they choose not to exercise the power of the parliament to amend the constitution. And therefore, I argue that this doctrine of basic structure is a very serious limitation on the power of the parliament to amend the constitution, and also it is a very serious limitation on the ability of the people to renew their faith in the provisions of the constitution. And this is why I have argued that doctrine of basic structure is not it should not be considered to be a valid doctrine for the interpretation of the constitution or for the adjudication of the validity of constitutional amendments. So in this judgment, in the discussion on cases of pre-constitutional laws, about their validity, and about this extension by the Supreme Court itself, that when the parliament or legislature, competent parliament or legislature decides not to amend, modify, repeal, reenact pre-constitutional law, then we can presume that the parliament has supported it, or parliament has validated it, or through parliament people have validated it. That logic applies mutatis mutandis to the doctrine of basic structure as well, and to the power of the parliament to amend the constitution. Now, coming to another aspect of presumption of the validity of the statute, is that, say for example, part of the statute is found to be unconstitutional, invalid, in terms of either Article 13 clause 1 or Article 13 clause 2. Now, what is to be done under those circumstances? Because the entire legislation is presumed to be valid, and if the entire legislation is valid, then what should happen when certain parts are found to be inconsistent or in contravention with the provisions of the fundamental rights, or there appears to be lack of legislative competence? Here we see that the doctrine of severability has been developed by the Supreme Court to interpret the provisions of the statute. And the most exhaustive discussion about the about the uh, doctrine of severability has taken place in RMDC versus Union of India in 1957, and the Supreme Court has held that the doctrine of severability rests on a presumed intention of the legislature, that if a part of a statute turns out to be void, invalid, that should not affect the validity of the rest of it, and that the intention is to be ascertained from the terms of the statute. So it is the true nature of the subject matter of the legislation that is the determining factor. And while a classification uh, made in the statute might go far to support a conclusion in favor of severability, the absence of it does not necessarily preclude it. So even while sustaining the validity, constitutional validity of a part of the statute, the court goes on to impute a kind of uh, intention, presumed intention, and on the part of the legislature, on the part of the parliament, that it wants, even if part of the legislation that it has passed is found to be void, invalid, because it violates fundamental rights, part 3 of the Indian Constitution, or lacks legislative competence, then the parliament or the legislature wants the rest of the provision to go through. And that's the premise on the basis of that's the premise which sustains the principle of severability or doctrine of severability. The doctrine of severability has been discussed and explained in detail in RMDC versus Union of India, whereby 5-6 pointers were given by the Supreme Court, which are very frequently quoted and have been quoted in recent judgments also. One of the points is that in determining whether the valid parts of a statute are separable from the invalid parts, it is the intention of the legislature that is the determining factor. So but how do you find out what is the intention of the legislature? The test to be applied here is whether the legislature would have enacted the valid part if it had known that the rest of the statute was invalid. So again, trying to find out what the legislature would have done if the legislature had known in advance that certain portion of the statute that it is going to pass is going to become invalid. So that is one test. Second was, if the valid and invalid provisions are so inextricably mixed that they cannot be separated from each other, then the invalidity of a portion must result in the invalidity of the act in its entirety. On the other hand, if there is those provisions are so distinct and separate that after striking out what is invalid, what remains is in itself a complete code independent of the rest, so independent from the invalid part, then it will be upheld, notwithstanding that the rest of it has become unenforceable and has become invalid. So even when the provisions which are valid, third point which was laid down in RMDC, even when the provisions which are valid are distinct and separate from those which are invalid, but if they form part of a single scheme which is intended to be operative as a whole, so if invalid part and valid part, they are distinct and they are separable, but they go on to constitute a scheme, and the intention of the legislature is to give effect to the entire scheme, then also the invalidity of a part will result in the failure of the whole. The entire legislation will have to be declared to be unconstitutional. Similarly, when the valid and invalid parts of statutes are independent and do not form part of a scheme, but what is left after omitting the invalid portion is so thin and truncated as to be in substance different from what it was when it emerged out of the legislature, then also it will be rejected in its entirety. The fifth point was, the separability of the valid and invalid provisions of a statute does not depend on whether the law is enacted in the same section or different sections. It is not the form, but the substance of the matter that is material, and that has to be ascertained on an examination of the act as a whole and of the setting of the relevant provisions therein. If after the invalid portion is expunged from the statute, what remains cannot be enforced without making alterations and modification therein, then the whole of it must be struck down as void. Otherwise, it will amount to judicial legislation. Finally, the court held that in determining the legislative intent on the question of separability, it will be legitimate to take into account the history of the legislation, its object, the title, and the preamble to it. So, therefore, we see that the presumption about the validity of statutes has given birth to the doctrine of severability, and the courts try to make every attempt to uh, protect the constitutional validity, even if it is possible to protect the validity of a part of the legislation. And the doctrine of severability seeks to ensure that only that portion of the law which is unconstitutional is so declared, and the remainder is saved. And this doctrine should be applied keeping in mind the scheme and purpose of the law and the intention of the legislature, and should be avoided where the two portions are inextricably mixed with one another. So this is so much about the doctrine of presumption about the validity of the statute, along with the doctrine of severability. We will also see certain documents, certain other cases with respect to the reading down of statute, a provision in the statute, how it is done, and how it is part of the interpretative exercise of the statute, and also reading into statute, whereby it appears to the court that by reading into the provisions of the statute, the constitutional validity of the legislation can be saved. And all these devices of reading into and reading down the different provisions of a statute, they originate from the first presumption, which is presumption about the validity of all the statutes which are passed by the legislature. Thank you very much. The concluding part will be in the next video.